The future of dairy is changing fast. Consumers want more protein, cleaner labels, and better nutrition with rich, authentic taste. Kerry partners with dairy manufacturers to tackle these challenges with science-led solutions created by people who know dairy inside out. From lactose-free systems and high-protein performance to natural preservation and flavor that stands up in real processing, Kerry helps you deliver solutions that work in the real world. With decades of expertise and pilot-scale validation, you'll move from formulation hurdles to market-ready breakthroughs. Kerry, better dairy begins here.
This is the Dairy Download, brought to you by EverAg Insights and the International Dairy Foods Association, where we offer extra sharp market and policy insights on dairy. I'm your host, Phil Plord.
And I'm your co-host, Kathleen Wolfley.
This episode is all about dairy ingredients. Our guests are working for companies finding new ways to use dairy every day. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, Kathleen, where are we now?
Well, Phil, CME spot prices as of Monday, April 6th. CME block cheddar closed at $1.67, up 8 cents. Spot butter closed at $1.75, down 7 cents. And the spot non-vegetarian milk market closed at $1.96, 3 cents higher on the week. Okay, Phil, what is the most important thing right now?
This may seem basic and rudimentary, but I think it's global demand. And I'm saying that because global supply still seems really strong. Just look at the latest weekly data out of France and Germany. You see milk production up 5% in France, 7% in Germany. The UK is only up 4%. US milk production remains, quite strong by historic terms. And so, the supply machine just keeps on rolling. And so far, the markets that, we've seen a pretty nice resurgence in global trade and global demand over the past, let's call it 3 to 6 months. But some of that happened at really low prices. And as prices have come up, I just wonder if the demand can keep pace, or if all the cupboards are full, right? We got powder down to $1.20 or less in many markets. People bought it. Market rallies. But the supply is going to be there tomorrow, it looks like. Is the demand going to hang on? Because if you're paying $1.50 or $60 or $70 for powder, or $1.90 if you're talking about US powder, it was fun at $1.20 or less. How much do you really need at 30 or 40 or 50 cents higher? I think that's going to be a defining question for what happens here over the next 4 to 6 weeks, because the supply is pretty awesome. Can the demand hang on, or is it going to roll back somehow?
Well, we may learn a little bit more at GDT tomorrow too, right? So on April 7th, we'll get an updated GDT, which may potentially show us, hey, are the buyers still really, really engaged in this marketplace, or are they in a position where they've loaded up those cupboards?
Yeah, we're starting to see some wobbliness here. The European price is a little wobbly, the GDT pulse a little shaky the last time around, and so it does make you wonder, because there are really no fears about supply at the moment, and I'm not sure that there should be.
Well, Phil, that leads me into my most important thing, and that's price competitiveness. And I think you led nicely into this, because I think this is one of the big elements of the demand piece is who is going to get that sale? Is the US going to get the sale into the international market? Is Europe, or is New Zealand? And as we just look at the non-fat market in general, the non-fat spread, US prices at $1.96 based on today's CME market. GDT prices 2 weeks ago were trading at $1.55. Dutch prices were at $1.46. Is it possible that, at least from a US perspective, that high prices here could start to throw a bit of a wet blanket on US powder exports? We still had pretty hot exports into Southeast Asia out of the US for February. But does that start to change, given that you can buy product out of Europe for 50 cents cheaper than out of the US? To me, that's one of the key elements of and maybe one of the key questions going into the next couple months is, at what price point do buyers say, I'm not going to go buy that anymore?
And look, I'm not persuaded that things are any different today than they have been for the past several months, which is this: on cheese. The European price is defining both the floor and the ceiling for the United States. And we've seen the European cheese price weaken here for the first time in a while. And so if we see a 5, a 10, a 15, dare I say 20 cent retreat in European prices, are we shifting the whole U.S. set of possibilities a little bit lower at the same time. Not sure it's going to happen, but I don't know. I mean, when I see those milk production numbers in Europe, you just think, well, this thing could buckle again.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, Phil, on the cheese side is that we did ship a record amount of cheese in the
128
first
million
2
pounds. Yeah. Whoa.
yeah, in February. So in the first 2 months of the year, it was a record amount of volume out of the US, and that's despite the fact that we were uncompetitive in fourth quarter compared to European mozzarella prices. What was interesting to me in sorting through the data is that we found other places to put cheese, more volume into the Caribbean, more volume into other pieces of other parts of Latin America. So more volume into Mexico too. If I'm not mistaken, we shipped a record amount into Mexico. So I do wonder, Phil, if there's an element of, okay, even if the US isn't competitive into South Korea and Japan, is the demand dynamic strong enough in places like Latin America where we've made these big inroads to keep the ball rolling for the US exporter? Or are all these other elements, whether it's currency or high crude oil prices, do those start to put a little bit more pressure and maybe lead to a bit of a back off in US exports as we get into Q2 and beyond?
So, stat of the week. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. My stat is $5.40. That's the average US retail diesel price per gallon for week 14 and marks a $1.81 increase from last year, week 14, and a 21-cent increase from 2022's high water mark. Okay, so we're looking at rising truck freight rates on the back of driver shortages, higher insurance costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just the overall cost to move product from A to B was already higher to start the year. Add fuel surcharges on top of that, and you have an even higher freight bill. So, Phil, you put together a little bit of math last week that suggests that the cost to move cheese from, let's say, California, Central Valley of California, to a cut and wrap facility in Wisconsin, to its final destination in the Northeast, costs somewhere between 2 to 2.5 cents more per pound than it did a year ago. And oh, by the way, the fuel cost hikes haven't necessarily slowed down. We're seeing crude oil trade above $100 a barrel today. I know that's a lot, maybe for a stat of the week, but to me, that's a big one to watch.
Well, I like that so much that I'm going to kind of copy it a little bit because my number stat of the week is $35.
Okay.
And that's what I estimate to be the difference. The average family is paying $35 more per week for gasoline today than was the case in February. Seen unleaded prices up about $1.25. The average there is $4.12 today, according to the AAA. We have 122 million households that have cars. I look at the demand numbers, stir it all together, and it comes out with $35 per family per week in additional gas costs. I don't know, something like $17 per tank full if you look at a 15-gallon tank or something like that. So, I mean, so far, I don't know that's been a big problem, but that money comes from somewhere. And if you take crude oil up to 120 and you take gasoline up to 5, which is what happened in the last time we saw $120 crude oil in 2022, then you're talking about $50 to $60 per week per family. And then I start thinking that the things get squeezed pretty tight there. Does it fall out of restaurant spending? All those things. So I think we're watching this energy thing very, very carefully. $35 a week. That's my, as of today, estimate of how much it more costs a family to keep their cars full of gas than it was just 60 days ago.
So $35, it made me think of, okay, if I'm going to take my family of four out to dinner just for takeout, you're probably still talking about $40 to $50 conservatively. I live in
Yep.
a probably lower cost market than a lot of our listeners in, in rural New York, but still, I mean, $35, you can pretty easily scrape together a couple extra bucks here and there if you stop going out to dinner.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were three of us here the other day, and we went out did a sandwich thing through the drive-through, national sandwich chain, and I want to say it was $37 for three subs.
Yeah.
So that's a, that seems like a lot, and b, that's that differential.
Okay, Phil. I feel like our conversation has maybe been a little bit depressing here. Maybe it's just the gas prices and
The subs were
but
good.
well, that's important. Some more. I had a pretty good fish fry on Friday too, but
There you go.
what's your fearless prediction?
Well, I feel betrayed by the butter market because I said, look, we're not going to see $2 butter in 2026. And we did, right? And we could see it was like a freight train coming. So I threw up my hands. I said, we're going to be wrong about this. And what did it last? It lasted less than a week, right? And all of a sudden we were, and now today we're down to 170. I don't know, we're down, right? So I'm going to say, I'm just going to give the butter market a little leeway to be the butter market. I'm going to repaint that line. I'm going to say that for the balance of 2026, we will not see butter trade over $2 per pound at the CME for more than 10 sessions. If it's going to go back,
Consecutive sessions or just
just
total?
10 period, 10 sessions period.
Okay.
Is that fearless or I don't know? That's not a bad prediction, right? I mean,
No, I don't think that's a bad prediction. It's certainly bold and fearless.
I still think this market, I still think we wake up every day and there's a lot of fat in this marketplace. So, yes, butter can trade over $2, but no more than 10 sessions.
All right. I'm also going to go with the butter fearless prediction. I think butter exports will drop below 20 million pounds in March of 2026. So we exported 22-ish million pounds in February. Yeah, around 22 million pounds. And I think that with all the noise in the Middle East, we shipped about 34% of our butter to the Middle East in the month of February. So I think we're going to see that impact hit the March exports.
All right, Kathleen, the timing for this episode's guest couldn't be better with IDFA's Ice Cream and Cultured Innovation Conference happening next week, where both of our guests' respective companies, Zentis and Kerry, will be in attendance, showcasing their latest innovations. Let's get to our first guest.
Today's guest is Nils Shaede, the marketing director at Zentis North America, a global family-owned food and beverage company founded in 1893. Nils began his career in Germany on the agency side. He moved to the U.S. in 2016 to work for the German American Chamber of Commerce in Chicago, then joined the team as Zentis 4 years ago. Nils, welcome to the Dairy Download.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
Okay, so this is a dairy-focused show, so let's talk dairy. Can you tell us more about Zentis and your work in the dairy space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, we have been around for a very long time, 1893, and we started with the retail jams and jellies, so very fruit oriented. That's how we started out. And then I think as far back as the 60s and 70s, we really expanded into creating what's known today very much in the dairy world as fruit preparations and other ingredients that enhance dairy products. So I think over the last 50 plus years, that's become actually the core part of our business globally in Europe and here in the US over the last 20 years as well. Supplying everyone out there who's working within dairy and yogurts, drinkable yogurts, and also ice cream, and helping them enhance their amazing dairy products.
So when you say food prep type products, are you talking still like jams and jellies, the fruit that you find in a cup of yogurt, or are there different things?
I think there's also different things. I mean, the core of course is still everyone loves strawberry yogurt. So that's something that we've always been doing and doing it well and in very many different variations. You know, you talk about organic or any other combinations of flavors. That's always been our wheelhouse from the start. The jams and jellies stayed there. You can still find them very much so in retail in Europe, and we're proud of that heritage and keeping that going. But what's become really a very big and core part of our business is supporting our dairy partners. And to answer your question, no, it's not just fruits anymore. I think while that's where we started in the 60s and 70s of really using our knowledge of fruits and processing them. The late 90s, for example, saw us introduce what's called like stable chocolate splits into the dairy world, and that's a really an innovation that we're really proud of. That we were the first ones bringing that to market. So enabling dairy products, yogurts, also more dessert-focused products with chocolate pieces that stay stable in your dairy preparation and give it another flavor and also another texture. So driving that innovation beyond just fruit was really important to us. And as we look into the last 10 or 5 years, it's not stayed that way. We've always pushed the boundaries. And the latest example of that is introducing popping boba to the dairy world here in the US. And that's something that we're proud of. So preparations that go into yogurt that include fruit and, for example, popping boba. So really looking into what else can pair well with yogurt products, what adds another flavor, another texture, and makes the products more unique.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, Niels, that I live in the middle of nowhere. So there are not very many boba shops in my neck of the woods. Tell me and tell the listener, what is a popping boba?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you would have asked me this question probably 3.5 years ago, I don't know if I could have answered that very well. So full disclosure, I think popping boba, for those of the listeners out there. They've been around here in, I would say, in the US and also in Western Europe for maybe the last 15 years or so with like bubble shops. And that's kind of where they've lived. In Asia, very popular for a very long time, where it's originated. To give credit to original inventors there, but there's two types of boba. So one is called like the tapioca boba, and most of you will be familiar with tapioca. So it's kind of that chewiness, the chewy piece that you can add to a beverage, or of course, also to dairy products or as a topping. But what we talk about here is the so-called popping boba. So it's a thin shell filled with a liquid core, often, for example, with fruit juice. And in that way, it can enhance and typically been used in what we call bubble tea. But what we've been doing here, especially the last 2 or 3 years, is introducing it to other applications. And that can range from things like cocktails, but also and especially yogurts. And that can be spoonables, that can also be drinkables. And I think it's a great product that especially resonates with the younger crowd and younger target group, that we've been slowly introducing also to products outside of that traditional bubble tea.
Fascinating. Well, let's talk a little bit about the nutritional side, as clearly people are focused on health and nutrition today. A lot of talk about protein. What outside of things like popping boba are you seeing in terms of trends within inclusions for dairy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think here in the US, we really work with all the brands out there today, all the dairy brands, and also a lot of the private labels. So I think we have a fair, good overview of what's going on out there in the market. And as you said, protein is everywhere, and I don't think we've completely seen the peak of that trend yet. We still see new products in that area. We see where it gets introduced from the drinkables to spoonables, but also, especially in Europe, actually. But that's also really interesting in dessert-like options. So, you're starting to see something that you maybe buy to trick yourself, but then it will also have a protein component to kind of give you that, okay, that little extra. So it's not just a treat; it's also supposedly a little bit more healthy for you, at least if you lead an active lifestyle and go work out. And I think that's something that our consumers are a lot more aware of and a lot more understanding. So we and all of our partners out there in the dairy world, I think, know this. So the products need to serve those new needs of our consumers.
What excites you the most about the inclusion space? Is it flavors? Is it textures? Is it indulgent versus sweet and savory? Sweet versus savory?
I think what I really enjoy seeing, and I think that goes beyond just this space, is the inclusion of more global flavors and combinations of different ingredients. We just touched a little bit on the history of popping boba, and me admitting, hey, I wouldn't have known really in detail what the popping boba is a few years back, but combining that maybe with flavors out of South America in a traditional Greek style yogurt, that's a completely new combination. And it also allows you to try new things, and that can be just an LTO, like a limited time offering, a seasonal one. We see matcha being pretty popular now these days, and also trying to make its way into dairy in certain ways. And it allows to try flavors, and see if they stick with a wider audience. I think that's kind of what's really exciting. It's matching texture with flavor, for new experiences.
I was just thinking about you're from Germany, right? You came to the US several
Yep,
years ago.
that's right.
What flavors from Germany would you incorporate, like, in terms of global flavors? And that it got me thinking about, like, how could you make, like, a beer flavored popping boba, and where would you put it? And I came up with beer cheese, but I don't think that that's the best. That would be a little weird.
Well, in America's Dairyland in Wisconsin, that might probably even
Yeah,
fly,
that's true.
actually. Um, but yeah, well, I mean, I think, and you're right. Originally, I'm from Germany. The German palate is maybe not the most exciting one in the world, but there's some that we like. Maybe not sauerkraut in a boba. But to kind of engage with that thought, we did create a pickle boba. Okay, so,
Ooh.
so that's something that you might not think of immediately, but it is and was one of these trends last year where we saw like pickled beverages coming up and inclusions and becoming really popular, and that's this new ingredient and inclusion really allows us pretty quickly to introduce these trending flavors and to play with them, and in the end, bring them to market. So, I think that's really exciting. If I think about the German aspect, I think what I grew up with a lot more that we haven't seen here in the U.S. as much is desserts in the traditional dairy space. We see a lot of ice cream. That's very the traditional dessert to go to, and that's great. And I love ice cream. My daughters love ice cream. But what we have in Germany a lot, there's like puddings and certain Italian-inspired desserts and stuff like that that you can grab right next to all of your yogurts on the shelf. And that's a very small space still here in the US, in the refrigerated aisle. I think that is actually something that, all jokes aside, there's space there for innovation still. And I think if our friends in the dairy world can combine that with some of these other trends, for example, like a protein-enriched kind of dessert that lives in the refrigerated shelf, I think those things could do really well. So I think there is still some room for inspiration that has space to develop over here.
Interesting. Well, thinking about innovation, talk to us about the Zentis innovative process, how you bring new products to market.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we're lucky that each of our production facilities has their own labs and their own set of R&D colleagues and scientists. Some with that more science background, but then also some who actually have a culinary background. And I think that combination I've learned is so valuable because be it us going to a trade show like Expo West or National Restaurant Association show in Chicago, where we sometimes showcase some of these new flavors and these new ingredients and applications. It really allows these teams to work towards these innovative pieces, and then they're right adjacent to our trial lines and getting this like to see does it make sense? Can we commercialize this? Can we make this work out on the scale? And I've seen that like successfully done so many times now that it's really exciting to see that time frame go. And a lot of these innovations actually start in the food service world first, where they get tried in restaurant or in the quick service world, and then if that's successful, it kind of migrates its way into retail and into what our partners are doing into that big scale. So that's really exciting. And then maybe to touch on innovation a little bit more from a different angle too. We are very close to all the sources that are out there that are tracking global and trending flavors. Many of you will know Mintel or Data Essential. So there's a lot of great tools out there that help pick up those flavor trends, ingredient trends. And we look at those on a regular basis and also work with them to be able to proactively go to our dairy customers and say, hey, guys, you should try this flavor. You should try this combination. That's what we're seeing right now moving up in the next 6 to 9 months. How about a sample? And that's really where the fun starts because I get to try it and then we get to send it out a couple different versions and get that cooperation going. And each single product, I think that's really important for us, is unique. Every single fruit preparation, chocolate, vanilla, even the boba, is unique to your yogurt, to your yogurt drink, to your Greek style yogurt, to make it work best. With your white mass, as we call it. So that's really part of our innovative process.
Okay, here's $1 million question, Niels. Where do you think flavors and inclusions are heading in the next, let's say, 2 years? What are we going to see on the shelf that we're not seeing today?
I think we'll still see more impact of the whole GLP-1 development and more people using it. I think overall, I would say the overall dairy industry would agree it's been not necessarily negative. We've seen an increase in volume with yogurts and that kind of core business. People are snacking more smaller portions in that way, and since yogurt is considered still very much a healthy snack and it's helpful, it's protein rich, it's a real product. I think that all has helped. So some of that will I think continue over the next 2 years, and then when we dive a little bit deeper into like flavors, textures, and inclusions, I think we'll see more unique combinations to stand out. Our blueberries and strawberries will always be there. They don't go away. That's always something people pick up. But I think what the consumers want, and we're just seeing kind of the beginning of that, is they kind of want different texture in the product. So that doesn't need to be just boba with that pop. It can also be something that's crunchy and chewy. So inclusions that you have in your dairy product, and I think it needs to surprise the consumer. It needs to be exciting. So I think we might even see more limited time offerings in that way, where we try different things that work and don't work, and some of them then might become what we call a line extension and a permanent a new product. So I think that's what we're going to see, and then I want to add natural flavors and natural colors. Okay, that's a really big trend that we know. Even here in the U.S. now, has taken up speed again over the last year and a half. I would say for us as a originally German company, that's kind of always been there. Europe in that way has been a little bit at the forefront over the last 20, 30 years, and natural colors and flavors have already been something that's been used. So your red 40s and all those ingredients that are now getting phased out here in the US, for us, that is something we've already done that. We've been there. So for us pitching that and helping some of our existing customers to say, hey, here's our idea how to replace that. Not just to be better for the consumer, but also to be compliant to new requirements that we see out there. So I think that underlines a shift that will stay. And I think this process over the time frame that you said, the next year or two, we'll probably see the conclusion of that change, that switch out from artificial to more natural flavors and colors. And I think there's always a little bit more space for premium ingredients. So while that's more of a niche in comparison to the wider market, I think in the premium section where it's organic and all natural, you will see more of that in that small space as well.
Well, Niels, really appreciate you joining the Dairy Download and teaching us a bit more about inclusions in dairy.
Absolutely, it's wonderful to be on here and to talk about what's our passion really here at Zentis.
Now let's get another perspective.
We're excited today to have Stephen Cobbe along. Stephen is Senior Technical Director for Dairy Business Development at Kerry. In that role, he works to advance how various Kerry technologies, including taste and functional ingredients, can be applied to provide solutions to complex customer challenges such as reformulation. Stephen has worked across and led several R&D technology and applications teams across food and beverage in the US and globally for 20 years. Stephen, welcome to the Dairy Download.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
What's the biggest thing happening in dairy ingredient innovation right now?
Well, I think there's a lot more being asked of dairy ingredients. I think with brands, they need to balance obviously great tasting products with added functionality, with being differentiated as well, and also speed to market. So balancing the taste of a product with the nutritional values, with the texture, with all the different clean label legislation and demands out there at the moment, and obviously ease of manufacturing costs as well. And if you're manufacturing, is it your own factory? Is it at a third party manufacturing facility? So balancing all of that is really critical.
So, Stephen, can you talk a little bit about how Kerry fits into that innovation story? I know when I drive down Interstate 39, I see that big Kerry building on the left, and there's test kitchens and all that fun stuff in there. What's going on in terms of Kerry and innovation? How does Kerry bring products to market? And what is Kerry actually selling to customers?
Oh, thanks, Phil. Yeah. So Kerry started off as a dairy co-op, and over the years we've been able to expand our technologies and customer access. So really using the basic fundamentals and our understanding of dairy, whether it's taste, if it's texture, if it's some of the nutritional components. So we work across a very broad range of markets, whether it's food or beverage. It could be snack, it could be meals. We're getting more into functional areas as well, functional health areas. And we have a very broad access to customers as well, whether it's industrial or some CPG or food service also. So here in Beloit, we've over 200 scientists. We have a very big pilot plant. We've multiple different rooms. So the different ingredients that we do have, it might be working with a savory flavor to make a certain type of sauce. With dairy, you could be working with some of our enzyme technology to make lactose-free dairy products. But a lot of different capabilities at the lab and also in the pilot plant.
Protein seems like it's everywhere. What's new in the high protein dairy space? And do you think that the trend is sustainable?
Definitely dairy. There's a lot of growth at the moment, a lot of opportunity across lots of different formats. I think obviously a couple of years ago people were looking for extra protein. Now it's gone from extra quantity of protein to the nutritional piece. Is it a fraction? Is it isolated? Is it hydrolyzed to be a kind of a hydrolysate or a peptide fraction? I think making sure it works in the application that's needed and making sure it tastes good as well is absolutely critical. So managing these technical challenges around grittiness or chalkiness or kind of higher viscosity is really important. I think taking the day parts and formats, is it a beverage? Is it a snack? And obviously making sure you really do your sensory homework on it. So sometimes you're under pressure to get a product to market quickly, but have you done your shelf life? Does it taste good? Is it safe? Is it going to last throughout the shelf life as well? A lot of dairy beverage is now, nearly a year shelf life at ambient compared to a couple of days or weeks refrigerated several years ago. And really taking it to the competition and what are they trying to do in other markets. So, for instance, Donna Berry had an article this morning about high protein ranch dressing that was just launched. So really thinking of what other people and other customers are doing.
It's funny. I actually found that high protein ranch in the grocery store and I sent a picture to Phil. And we kind of have this question of, is this the jump the shark moment? And I feel like high protein ranch is getting closer. All right, Stephen, curious, where is innovation showing up in dairy texture and mouthfeel? You talked a little bit about bringing in people to test different products and trying to hit the mark. So talk to us about that innovation.
Yeah, obviously with high protein, I think as the area is advancing, there's people work with fractionated proteins, microparticulated proteins, or for example, clear or hydrolyzed proteins. You see these sparkling carbonated protein beverages. With that, in terms of texture and the experience of texture, there's several different tools. That, for example, we at Kerry might work with enzymes is a big area that we see. It could be used to kind of break down the protein or some materials that cause viscosity. In some cases, it helps with helping the shelf life of the product. It's not going to gel up over time or separate as well. And another big area is probably around flavor modulation. So as you do bring in different components and make things more nutritional, you're bringing in, bitter peptides. How you kind of mask these bitter flavors is really, really important. So on the one hand, you want more protein. You maybe want more protein that's functional. That could be a bit more bitter. But you also want maybe less sugar. So how do you balance that sweetness, the creaminess, the overall flavor profile? So this masking flavor modulation technology using natural extracts from dairy and from plant-based materials is really critical.
Why do you think that lactose free and sugar reduction innovations remain so challenging?
That's a good question. I think there's a couple of different reasons. I think with lactose, obviously some people are intolerant to it. It's a cause of digestive discomfort. I think with more protein, some people are on these kind of GLP type medication and associated diet. So Digestive discomfort is a big factor. Loss of kind of taste as well is a challenge. So lactose-free, I think, there can be an intolerance piece. I think also in some cases it can be to do with processing of materials. So if you do change your sugars, you break down your lactose, it tastes a little bit sweeter. How is that going to affect the overall taste impact of the product itself? And then obviously if you're adding protein or peptides or other functional ingredients, you got to balance that out. So there's a taste challenge there. And then I think another big area is obviously operations and costs. So if you do want to produce lactose-free products, how and where you add the lactase enzyme is really, really important. Is it in a tanker? Is it in a silo? Are you going to slow down the factory if something goes wrong? What do you do? How fast can you get the tests and the data to make sure it is lactose-free? What limit, how low do you need to go to make sure your product can be lactose-free? So that compliance piece can impact. There's a regulatory piece, and there's obviously cost as well.
Okay, that brings me to the next question. What about enzymes, fermentation? What kind of role is that playing in innovation?
Yeah, enzymes are really interesting materials. Like they're so broad. Like the dairy industry is obviously quite familiar with them over the years. Modified dairy ingredients that use enzymes to kind of speed up the ripening of cheese to get more enhanced cheese, savory type flavors. More recently, they're used a lot with creating protein type fractions or peptide type fractions. So you could break down the proteins and create novel peptides. It can also be used for the sugars, like we talked about, if it is lactose free. That's a big growth area. And ultimately, with enzymes, you can create novel flavors beyond the traditional modified dairy ingredients. So if you do work with a plant material or dairy material to break down the sugars or convert to sugars, there's natural sugars that can be made that are high intensity natural sweeteners with enzymes. For example, something like tagatose, that'd be a good example. So really, really versatile. Could take in a lot of different directions for taste and for texture, and also for processing related efficiencies.
What's one consumer expectation that's not going to go away soon?
I'd probably touch base if you talk about taste. I think obviously, I should say obviously, but taste is so critical. Dairy does taste great. I think again going back to high protein, people have been able to make it taste great because dairy is such a good vehicle for that. So again, how do you balance that out? What are the tools that you can use? How do you make it indulgent or refreshing? If you are on GLP medication, you may not want to be too indulgent because you feel too full up. You might want it to be more refreshing or have a different type of experience with it. So balancing the taste and the different types of taste experiences are critical.
So yeah, let's go on that. Let's touch on that GLP point for a second. How much new work or different project types are you looking at the past couple of years as these GLP-1 medications have really kind of come to the fore?
Yeah, like GLP, again, go back, like people are looking at it in terms of satiety or maybe extra protein or reduced sugar in their diets. But I think when it comes to digestive health, for example, metabolites naturally produced, or whether you're fortifying your diet with prebiotics like fiber, probiotics, kind of postbiotics is a new area as well. Obviously, there's a lot of probiotics that come from dairy. We produce probiotics ourselves, and we've done a lot of work with that into GLP-1 type applications to help how the probiotics interact with protein, digest the protein, and make sure you get more protein utilization.
And is it fair to say the volume of those inquiries and projects has been increasing the past year or so?
It has for sure. Actually, the last several years, I think COVID really kind of kicked things off and really pushed things along, and the importance of dairy and the value of dairy. But yes, the last several years, yes.
So, how'd you get here, Stephen? I mean, you have a vast technical expertise, and it's kind of a really cool. I mean, I think that common folk like myself, oh, well, dairy is cheese, right? And dairy is butter, and dairy is this and that, and then you're really in the nitty gritty, in the core, the ingredient side, the fractions. But how'd you get to this place?
Sometimes I think of like all foods, like we work with coffee a lot as well, for example. So coffee has several hundred ingredients in it. And obviously you see coffee growth increasing significantly the last couple of years, especially coffee and dairy. It's been great for both, for coffee and for dairy. I think in dairy there's so many different types of ingredients, whether they could be isolated, could be purified. or it could be kind of broken down with enzymes like we talked about, or you could extract these natural flavor modulation type ingredients to help with taste and help with the dairy experience. So it can go a lot of different directions.
I guess I'm also specifically interested in you personally. How did you get to learn all this stuff?
Uh, I've been very lucky in terms of the people I've worked with at Kerry. I think Kerry goes out and acquires a lot of different technologies, but usually at the same time we get to acquire access to customers, to applications, and we get to work across if it's a meal sauce type application, which crosses into maybe a snack type application, or if it is beverage like coffee, or if it is, we see this crossover between refreshing beverage with sparkling protein type carbonated beverages now as a great example of that. So having worked in that area with refreshing beverages in the past with sodas, I've been able to apply some learnings across. And very lucky to do that.
And I guess finally, from where you sit, what do you see as the next frontier in dairy ingredient innovation? I mean, this protein thing has been kind of unhinged now for whatever, a year, 2 years, 3 years. What's next, or what are you excited about that you see in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of frontiers, and I definitely don't know all the different frontiers that are out there. But some of the ones that we have seen, obviously, like we talked about, they're driven by nutrition or by texture or consumer experience or versatility, day parts, consumption, etc. I think with dairy, there's a lot of bioactive materials in dairy. People are familiar with probiotics, with lactoferrin, more recently with colostrum, for example. But I think with advances in technology, whether it's precision fermentation, again, like the enzymes that we talked about, there's different types of peptides, metabolites out there. So I know personally, I've seen some of the work out there around protein exosomes and these vesicles, and these natural components in milk, how they help regulate intracellular processes. Could it be therapeutic applications? More nutritional, more functional health benefits for dairy. I think that's a fascinating area. It'd be really interesting where it goes.
And my sense is we can start to really dial that stuff in almost on a personal level, right? I mean, you can get pretty specific about what you're giving to who and what and why, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's I was called the different metabolomic tools that are out there, the Human Genome Project, personalized nutrition, like you mentioned, Phil. Yeah, I think there's a lot of angles, a lot of directions it can go.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us on the Dairy Download.
Thanks very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
That's a wrap for today's show. As always, want to thank our production team, Mariah Minnick, Andrew Jerome, and Jeff Cullen at IDFA, and Abby Bauer over here at Everag. And thanks to our sponsor, Kerry. If you are interested in what Kathleen and I do for our day jobs, check us out at ever.ag. And remember, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button, leave us a positive review on your favorite podcast platform, and tell a friend.
Thanks for listening to the Dairy Download. Until next time, stay sharp.